Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Well, hey there. Thanks for joining us for another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. It's me, Damian Mason. You knew that when you tuned in. I've got a great guest for you. His name is Matt Swanson. We're talking today about the Mexico corn fiasco. Oh, my God. Mexico said that they won't allow genetically modified corn. And what happened? Here in the United States, we started going from panic to threats. Told them, you know what? We're going to sell you genetically modified corn whether you like it or not. Anyway, Matt Swanson's an Illinois farmer, and he's also an affiliate with XtremeAg. You know about my work with XtremeAg, some of the most advanced, forward-thinking farm operations in North America, doing trials and also sharing all their information on their platform, XtremeAg.farm. I'm the producer for their content, and I also met Matt through that format. And I said, hey, man, you want to come and talk about this? Because on the side, he and I had a conversation about this. The reality, in case you don't know, I'm holding the headline right here, dear listeners, Mexico has just softened their stance on GMO corn imports. What had been proposed in Mexico, our friend and our neighboring country to the south, they said, you know what, we're not going to take GMO corn starting in January 2024. The National Corn Growers Association here in the United States went bananas. Farmers in the Corn Belt went bananas and started clamoring that we needed something about it. And we even went so far as to almost threaten them, which I think is ridiculous, by means of the new trade agreement with Mexico, Canada, the United States, the reformed NAFTA, which is called whatever the hell it is, the new NAFTA, if you will. So anyway, Matt and I are going to talk about this because we think it's misguided. We think it brings up some various, shall we say, sentiment that is not going to be heard in most corn circles, but people like Matt and I are saying this is all much ado about nothing, first off. And secondly, it's very wrong-headed to think that somehow we should threaten them into buying what we make. So that's what we're covering here today. Mr. Swanson, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Damian.
All right. So you and I were talking about this before we ever hit the record button. And it was last week. And I said, why don't you come on my show and we'll talk about this? You are not like the normal corn producer. The normal corn producer says, well, damn it, I'm good at making genetically modified corn and Mexico ought to take it. To where you and I say, well, what if they don't want it? What difference does it make? Then let's just produce non-GMO corn and charge whatever the going price is for non-GMO corn.
Yeah, that's essentially, so we grow, we've been 100%, we're not quite 100% non-GMO corn right now. And I don't have an issue with the GMO itself. I think my issue with this particular situation is kind of starts and ends with the fact that you've got the Mexicans asking to buy, slightly more expensive product. And we're saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to sell you something else. And in the meantime, you've got some representatives of NCJ when they were meeting with lawmakers talking about how non-GMO corn is an inferior product and stuff like that. And that kind of caught my ire the first time I read that. So it's just a frustrating thing to see.
Well, it is frustrating. First off, let's go to the reality here. Okay, we started using GMO soybeans was the first broad adoption in 1996. So genetically engineered corn, early 2000s, in the last 15 to 20 years, right?
It's been 20 years anyway. Yep.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is not the first time this has happened. Europe has gone through their thing a couple of different times on bans on in the European Union. And Mexico is a big customer. First off, so I want to talk about the reality of the GMO corn, but I want to get to the fact that Mexico's a big customer. Let's talk about the reality of GMO corn. It's not as though it's all we can produce. We did just fine 20 years ago as the number one corn producing nation in the world before we ever actually used genetically engineered science to produce corn. So the idea that somehow they need to buy it because it's all we can make, that's not true at all. You just said almost all of your acres are non-GMO corn, not because you have some moral opposition, not because you're a zealot, because simply it's a price premium product, right?
Yeah, it's cheaper to grow actually, because of the tech fees and stuff that the companies charge for the traits. Our seed costs are about $100 to $150 a bag cheaper than traded corn, and we don't have a lot of additional inputs. We may spend an additional $5 to $10 an acre on herbicide or insecticide or a combination of both.
For the person, by the way, for the person, Matt, that says, okay, I've heard about this thing, because I have a lot of listeners. I always reference my college roommate that listens, and he learns all about ag from listening to this. A bag of seed corn with genetically modified organism, with genetically engineered traits. And the traits, of course, are to make it so that it resists things like rootworm without having to use chemicals. So that's the benefit of genetically engineered corn, is that it's got traits bred into it, genetically engineered into it to make it resistant to different nasty things that kill corn, right?
Yeah, essentially, most of them, they introduced a way for it to produce a protein that's toxic to whatever pest they're targeting. Usually is how that works.
Like corn rootworm would be the one, right? Yeah. Okay. And so that's the advantage of genetically engineered seed. And then you're saying, well, it's $100 and some more a bag. So instead of $350 a bag, you're paying $200 for a bag of your seed?
Yeah, round number cash price, is probably 180 to 200 today. And the same, depending on which variation and how many traits it has on it, could be, approaching 350 to 400.
Okay, so if you're spending $150 less a bag in round numbers, and you have to use $5 more of treatment to keep the corn rootworms away, for instance, it clearly pencils out. Do you get a yield drag? Do you have less yield with your non-GMO corn?
So in the absence of pests, generally we see no yield drag, and we've actually had some instances where we've had the exact same set of genetics, where they've added the trait to it. So we plant the traded version and the untraded version, and we've actually had the untraded version out yield the traded version on several occasions. And there's a really easy science explanation for that is that traded version is using energy to produce that protein, right? So that energy is not going into yield.
Yeah.
So when you don't have to make that protein and you don't need it, that energy is reserved for yield generation.
And certainly neither you nor me, to the person listening, are anti-genetically modified seed crops. For God's sakes, I'm all about it. In fact, there's the soybean thing. I tell everybody, I'm of the age when kids got hired to go out and walk soybean fields all summer long with a weed hook or a machete because we had weeds that you couldn't get rid of. GMO soybeans were a godsend. Now we have some weed resistance to the glyphosate, which came about because of that. But anyway, here's the thing. So the idea that Mexico says we don't want GMO corn, and then many of the producers and our representatives at the National Corn Growers Association, Matt, throw up their arms and start screaming like, this is a dirty pool, for God's sakes. This is what I mean. We could fill the market just with guys like you saying, all right, I'll grow non-genetically engineered corn for Mexico.
Yeah, we actually talked about this on Twitter, and we do it purely for dollar reasons. And if you have to generate that many million metric tons of non-GMO corn, there are guys all over the country that are going to do the same math that I do. And they're going to say, yeah, we'll do that. There's some shipping, there's some things around there that we'd have to get figured out, but that's in the grand scheme of things, that's not a big deal.
Well, the good thing is about, a marketplace sorts this out, and you're not, if it was such a niche, you're talking like they only need 20,000 acres of our corn supply, but they don't. They buy a significant amount of the 90 million acres of corn that we produce. You could look at the numbers and say, like, I don't know, looks like about 10% of those acres, 5 to 10% of those acres are seriously gobbled up by Mexico.
Yeah. And they're, I think if I remember correctly, our number one export partner as far as corn goes anyway. There's some different versions, there's yellow corn, there's white corn, there's all these things, but that's nothing the market can't sort out. The biggest issue in the first year, if let's say they stick with their 24, ban,
which they've softened. But yes, the original announcement was January 2024. And dear listener, Matt and I are recording this in February of 23. So you're talking about 11 months from now, this is going to go into effect, which means if we really were concerned about it, there could be acre switches going on. More people could be like Matt going into this spring and say, hey, it looks like there's going to be an opportunity for non-GMO corn. I'll go ahead and devote some of my acres to non-genetically engineered seed. And that would be very easy done.
Yeah. Right. And as far as like getting the industry prepared as a whole, the biggest challenge is going to be, in my book, getting enough seed acres produced. And you've got essentially 2 seed growing seasons between now and planting the 24 crop. Okay. So
for our non-ag people that listen to this, you said something about the bag of seed that's, a couple $100 less. A bag of seed corn roughly covers 2.2 acres, right?
Yeah, round numbers, depending on what your seeding rate is, about 2 acres.
Yeah. So about 2 to 2.2 acres, I think, is the number. And so again, if you're saving $150, that's about $75 an acre that you're saving. So then you've got to use a little bit more treatment. So again, you're still making a net, if yield stays the same. So it's not as though there's an economic hit to growing non-genetically engineered corn. So I don't see this. I fail to see why this became a scrape.
I think the biggest issue is that that's not what we do. And that's NCGA. The majority of their growers are growing GMO corn, ourselves included. Just not on large, as far as a percentage wise, not a large percentage, but I think this is a really short-sighted way to address this. I mean, they're asking to buy a higher value product. I mean, right now, depending on what the variety is and what it is, we're getting between 35 and 55 cents a bushel in additional premium. And the grain companies are taking a cut of that, and there's some transportation guys that are going to get a cut of that to do the segregation and all that. This has the potential to be a win-win for everybody, but the Mexican people really.
Yeah, because they'll be paying more. They'll be paying more for corn. Here's the thing. I've oftentimes, Matt, talked about in agriculture, we have a commodity mindset that seems unshakable. And this is a prime example of an unshakable commodity mindset. Because you get together a bunch of farmers. Would you see that guy down the road? He's charging $5 for a bale of straw. Hell, I'll sell it for $2. They will talk themselves right into being at break even. Like they just have this ridiculous concept of be cheaper, be so cheap. I remember that exactly. Some guy down the road selling bales of straw for $5. I'll go ahead and undercut him and sell it for basically my cost of production. This commodity mindset. The Mexican government wants to pay a premium for non-genetically engineered food grain. And we're fighting it. And like when someone comes to Damian Mason and says, hey, we want to pay you more to do what you do, I say, oh, yeah, I'm listening.
Okay, take it. Yeah, take their money. Like that's the thing. And I asked NTJ about that, and they said, well, we just don't have enough of it. And I'm like, we can solve that problem. So
the statement that they would make is we don't have enough non-genetically engineered corn acres or bushels. Well, that can be fixed very simply. Acres can switch.
And they say, well, then they don't want to pay for it. And the simple answer to that is then they don't get it. If you take a bushel of non-GMO corn and the Mexicans decide, well, we're not going to pay extra for it, guess what happens to it? It gets processed the same place that your bushel of GMO corn would have been processed at. There's no difference. Which is what's kind of crazy to me. The argument doesn't even make sense. But
no, the argument doesn't make sense. But do you think that this is a problem with all of agriculture, the commodity mindset? But then the problem is it gets reinforced. You just said exactly what happens. The farm person already has that mentality that, I want to go ahead and just do what I do and produce a commodity. And then these groups reinforce it. They say, well, we got to make our members happy because these corn growers are our members and we exist because of the checkout program. So we're going to go ahead and just preach back to the choir and say, yeah, take that, Mexico, you silly country that wants to pay more for corn and actually demand something as a customer.
That's the crazy thing. And it's the same idea. I don't remember if you remember this, Damian. Several years ago, there was I think it was Successful Farming. I think maybe that had a cover with presumably a suburban mom at the grocery store, and it said, meet your new boss or something. And people freaked out as far as the ag community goes. Like, oh, they're not my boss. I do this, I do that. And in ag, we're doing better about it now, especially with a lot of the, farm direct stuff. But as a whole, we're still way too attached to this idea that we're the boss. And at the end of the day, we're producers, and producers are beholden to their customers, right?
Oh my God, am I glad you said that? All right, we're going to visit that. But first, I want to tell our listeners about AgVisor Pro. I'm wearing the hat if you're watching the video, or if you're watching on Acres TV, where we now are the number 3 or 4 program on the Acres TV platform. That's right. I just found that out last week from our friend Matt Falk. So check out my videos at Acres TV. And also, if you're listening to this, either way, you can see that I'm wearing this hat right now, AgVisor Pro. AgVisor Pro is a company that's begun by my friend Rob Syke, brilliant agricultural entrepreneur. And he found out that 19% of a farmer's time is actually trying to allocate information, trying to get answers to questions. And Rob's big thing is if you can shorten time, if you can shorten time and distance, you can make money. So he invented AgVisor Pro. It's an app. It goes right here on your smartphone. Just take out your smartphone, type in right now, go to your app store. You use this thing. You're sitting in your machine that steers itself. So you've got time. Get out both hands, get your phone out and type in AgVisor Pro. It's very simple. AgVisor Pro. It's an exchange information. It's an information exchange platform, if you will. You can be an expert. Probably there's stuff that you know that you could help out somebody that's in another state or province. You can do that. You can upload your profile and you can become an expert. It's a collection of information via people that are experts in their field, from beekeeping to ragweed management on your farm operation, whatever it is. Go to AgVisor Pro. It's a place for information, and you can be the information provider. And guess what? It's right there on your phone. Very easy, very convenient. Doesn't cost you nothing to put the app on your phone. Do it. All right. I've got about 90 different things that you brought up there, Mr. Swanson. Meet your new boss. The idea that we work for ourselves and we don't work for anybody. I tell my ag audiences, there's no such thing as self-employed. Get over this. Get over yourself. We all work for other people's money. Every dollar you're going to make for the rest of your life is currently somebody else's dollar. Right now, those are pesos. They're going to convert to dollars. And us having this idea that Mexico has to buy what we make is so, like I said, somewhere between myopic, naive, stupid, unbusinesslike. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. And listen, again, I don't have an issue with growing what you think is the right thing for your farm or doing what you decide you need to do, but you have to understand you're beholden to somebody, right? So, and there's certainly areas of Illinois even that growing non-GMO corn is not a good option because they have tremendous corn rootworm problems and things like that. But at the end of the day, one of the NCGA pushbacks privately was, well, we may lose yield. I'm like, maybe. That hasn't necessarily been our experience. And at the end of the day, if we're working on net revenue, right? Mm-hmm. If there's less available in the country, that's going to show up in price at some point or another.
I think that the whole argument that somehow there's not going to be enough supply. Well, one thing we know is demand and price always create supply, and we are amazing at producing corn. So it's almost like pretending that somehow we can't do it. And that's the other part that I don't like. If you're the National Corn Growers Association, instead of opposing this, you should have said, hey, that's fantastic. We're going to help our members get a value-added corn product. Because there's less acres of it, you can now supply this marketplace and get 50 cents more a bushel for it. Who wouldn't want that?
100%. And, I don't know the economics well enough to say that, let's say if they said, okay, no, for real, we're going to do all 21 million metric tons next year are going to be non-GMO. I don't know what that does to the premium in the first year or for the first 2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
It's going to get substantial and then it's going to come back down and the market will figure it out. And, NCGA is, for whatever reason, dead set on the idea that the market's not going to figure out and it's going to be a disaster and we're never going to sell another bushel of corn to Mexico. And that's just not true.
Yes, it's all the problem I have with these trade organizations, these farmer-funded, checkoff program-funded groups like the National Corn Growers Association, which is supposed to be promotion for our product, is they almost seem to have a lack of comprehension of how markets work. And of all things, you should know how markets work if you are in this role where you're helping your farmers that grow 90 million acres of this stuff.
Yeah, the market's going to figure it out. I mean, yes, there are going to be some growing pains, but you know what? We needed to start getting ethanol produced in Texas. So guess what we did? We got grain shuttles all over Illinois that all they do is put unit trains together to go to Texas. You don't think the same thing can happen for Mexico? It absolutely can.
The person listening to this might say, is this even a concern? I've got the numbers here in front of me. It turns out China is was still in the year 2022 a slightly bigger corn buyer than Mexico with 16 million metric tons. They were putting Mexico at about 15.5 million metric tons, but that number is growing. The projection I saw was they thought by next year they'd be in that 17 million metric tons on demand, which would put them ahead of China. So they're our number 2 right now. By the way, a lot of folks don't fully grasp this, even in agriculture. This idea that we somehow all China, and I tell everybody, man, China is going to go away. China is our adversary. Mexico is not. Mexico is we have a border with them. Granted, that sometimes is disputed over, the porosity of it, but for God's sakes, and they are with 1/10 of the population of China. 1/10 the population of China, they are 78% as big of a customer as China in terms of our agricultural exports. We should, instead of going down across the border and browbeating them, we should be absolutely whining and dining them and thanking them for being our number 2 agricultural customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the simple fact is anybody that has any knowledge of dollars and what it takes. I mean, if let's say Mexico tries to go somewhere else, any place they're going to try to get corn from somewhere else is going to be from a boat, right? It's going to have to come from South America. It's going to have to come from Ukraine. It's going to have to come from somewhere else, which is going to add costs automatically. I mean, that you can't do that for free, right? Yeah. So we have the option to probably be able to bring non-GMO corn to the country at scale and still be cheaper in a lot of ways than what any of those other sources are. And unfortunately,
just because Nebraska is a hell of a lot closer to Mexico than, as you said, Kazakhstan.
Yeah. Put it on a train and move it down. I mean, that's all they've got to do. I think what's unfortunate is NCGA and the U.S. government has decided that, well, because they're so close, we can browbeat them into doing this. And what I'm saying is just take their money. Like, yes, there's going to be some challenges as far as the first couple of years of making this happen, but we're really not out anything. Again, if 20% of the U.S. corn production next year was non-GMO and Mexico decides not to take it, all they're going to do is move that same non-GMO yellow corn into our standard yellow corn supply chain, and it'll be gone.
Right. Exactly. It's not as though they're 2 distinctly different products from the terms of how they're used or where they get used. It's just a matter of preference. Incidentally, when people are saying, wait a minute, you and Matt are carrying on here, do we really browbeat them? The quote from this article from just Valentine's Day, U.S. officials threatened to take action under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, USMCA, the new NAFTA, over the potential disruption of the corn trade. The new U.S. agriculture trade chief last week told Reuters he had given Mexico until February 14th to respond to requests to explain the science behind Mexico's planned bans. Again, they're doing exactly what agriculture does, commodity mindset, and then what Americans love to do, browbeat everybody else and think American agriculture thinks you can't go anywhere else. We're the biggest. Bullshit. They can go and buy corn from about 100 other countries. Well, 20 other countries for sure. But this is real indicative of kind of what I think is a bad business mindset moving forward, because when we got all worked up, I heard in agriculture, this is interesting how it's such a hypocrisy, Matt, when there was the Trump tariffs against China. Then I had everybody in agriculture telling me, when I said it's a global marketplace, it's fine. So China doesn't buy our soybeans, they buy them off of Brazil. Wherever Brazil was supplying them, we'll supply. The point is, it's a global market. Imagine there's just a whole reservoir of soybeans, and then countries come and take a truckload out of them, right? Well, anyway, everybody then said, well, once we lose China, they'll never come back. He messed this up. We'll never have them as a customer again. Those same people should be saying this about Mexico. Once we piss them off because we tell them, nope, you're going to take our genetically engineered corn, whether you like it or not, then where's the sentiment that we had just 4 years ago thinking that we would never regain China as a customer? Why are we not worried about regaining Mexico as a customer if we let them go away and they start buying their corn from Brazil?
Well, that's okay. So I made this exact point to one of the NCGA directors. Like, one, the corn that they're going to get is not going to come out of a vacuum. It's coming from somewhere, first off. Okay. So that doesn't change the global supply situation really. Right. Or total bushels at all.
Right.
And then the other part of that is, yes, the Mexicans are kind of beholden to us to supply their corn, and they don't have the ability to produce their own. Okay. Absolutely. That's true. Or at least the quantity that they need.
You said so. You said what they think, that they're beholden to us. They're not beholden. They're beholden to a world market. They have to buy it, meaning they can't produce the corn that they need, so they have to buy it. But they don't have to buy it from the United States of America.
No, they don't, and nobody likes a bully. And if essentially what we're doing right now is we're using USMCA in this kind of science provision they have written into it to say, well, this is what we want to do. You don't have an option really to go anywhere else, and we're gonna come back at you for this, that, or whatever. And when in reality, all they're asking us to do is to provide them a more expensive option that we can sell them.
The other thing, so I said, American agriculture, sometimes I wish I wasn't saying this, because there's going to be people that get mad at me and think I'm being critical. I'm being critical to help you. Again, we've had commodity mindset, and then we have this nobody, you can't go anywhere else. We're the only game in town, which is a very bad, when you believe you're not replaceable, you usually are setting yourself up for failure. One thing I've learned in my career and my business, successes and failures, is learn that you're replaceable. They don't need, we're not irreplaceable. But the other thing that American agriculture likes to do is, what did he just say here? They demanded that the United States trade chief demanded that Mexico explain the science behind these planned bans. It has nothing to do with science. And you know what? We went to the damn courts as Bayer Monsanto went to the courtroom and argued that glyphosate was safe because of the science. And you know what? They lost all 3 court cases and settled for $11.5 billion. It's not about the science. It's never about the science. Get over yourself. Just give them what the hell they want.
Yeah, in this case, I mean, they're relying almost completely on a line in the USMCA that requires any objection to things like this be supported by science. And you can make that argument till you're blue in the face. There's always going to be people that disagree with whatever your science is, whether it's accurate or not. And in this case, what's crazy to me is we're arguing over something that would potentially bring more revenue into the United States. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like in this case, yes, that's what it says in the black and white. Got it. In this case, they're asking to spend more money. Please just let them spend more money.
Yeah, it's very bad business. I worked in the lighting business before I quit to do what I do now. So 30 years ago, I was a lighting sales rep. And those old time manufacturing type people just couldn't get over themselves that recessed lighting performs better with a black baffle, meaning that controls glare. But the homeowner, like you said, meet your new boss and it shows a woman in a kitchen. And this idea was the woman that wanted her beautiful ceilings to not have a bunch of black holes in it. So they said, we want white trims. And these old lighting types said, these damn housewives don't know what they're talking about. Black trims make the lighting better. White trims just create more glare. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's a piece of plastic that you can extrude black plastic as well as you can extrude white plastic. And you're arguing over this. Why don't you sell the customer what they want to buy? And by the way, the company down the road responded with making white plastic pieces of lighting trims. The thing cost 40 cents to make, right? And we sold them they sold them for $1 more. So instead of $6.50, they sold them for $7.50. So you took something and made, what in the hell is wrong with you? Sell the customer what they want. It's an age-old thing. Are we selling what we can make or making what we can sell?
Well, again, I have no problem with saying, okay, let's do presentations on why this is okay. At the end of the day, it's the customer's money. And if they want to spend more of it for something that you can do almost as easily, then just do it. I mean, that's, I would almost split the NCGA and the commodity groups and the U.S. trade representative in different groups here. NCGA's primary responsibility is to do things for corn growers, promote trade for corn growers, promote corn use. In this case, should be a home run.
No, it seems as though they're doing the antithesis. They're actually working against corn sales. They're working against moving more bushels of corn. I want to go on to another part of this. This is where we should look forward, because you and I have already made our point that we think this is wrong-headed. This is a poor decision. This is a quote from our Secretary of Agriculture. Quote, "The U.S. believes in and adheres to a science-based, rules-based trading system and remains committed to preventing disruptions to bilateral agricultural trade and economic harm to U.S. and Mexican producers, Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack said in a statement. What the hell is that? We're going down this road where now the Secretary of Agriculture, instead of saying we're versatile, we're amazing, we're the best corn producing country on the planet, and if our customers want it to be a certain variety, we'll do that. That's what he should say. Instead, he's taking a victory lap, believing that somehow he has taught them a lesson. I think this is bad long term. Go, Matt.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think anytime that you have people buying, like you it's a customer, right? And your customer is saying, this is what we want. You can argue with them until you're blue in the face. Why don't you just give them what they want and then make them happy so they come back for more, right? I mean, I just don't. This whole situation is incredibly frustrating to me because the only reason it makes sense is if all we're interested in is preserving the status quo and not getting better. And in this case, we have a complete opportunity to get better and sell more corn and make more money, and we're not doing it.
Yeah, and I'll go on further. And again, this is why it's so wrongheaded, from everything from our Secretary of Agriculture to our U.S., what do they call it, the trade chief that went on their whole agricultural trade chief. We somehow, if China said, we want you to buy corn that has to be blessed by a rabbi and urinated on by a steer, we'd figure out a way to do that because we just are absolutely convinced we can't live without China. And yet our second biggest trading partner, tied with Canada, Mexico is, right here with a common border that's growing and ascending. You know, they became tied with Canada as our second biggest ag customer just last year and have gotten bigger every year as a customer. And we're almost, instead of saying, great, you know what, we want to work with you more, shaking them down. And it's just asinine because China will go away as a customer, and we would really do well to have a continually growing agricultural trade with Mexico, who has an ascendant economy. Their economy is getting better, and they've obviously been ascending as an ag customer.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the charts that I've got in front of me, and it's based in marketing years, but I mean, since in 2003, 2004 marketing year, Mexico was buying roughly 10 million metric tons of corn products. Okay. As of 22, 23, and I know your numbers are a little different, but this is the one I've got in front of me. It's over 20 million. So
yeah, the number, well, like I said, the number they said was about 15 to 17. Either way, you're talking it's somewhere between 50 to 100% more than it was just 18 years ago. It sounds to me like we really have a great opportunity here to have a growing customer.
Yeah, and it's a developing economy, and you're absolutely right in that China is an adversary. I mean, they're a global adversary, and arguably with the Russian entanglement in Ukraine are the primary global adversary to the U.S. and to the West at large.
Yeah.
Their whole economic planning is reducing dependence on the West so that they don't have to do that. I mean, that's why you see them trying to steal genetics in the United States and things like that.
Yeah.
And why are we planning on them as our primary customer? I mean, we can ride that horse as long as we're able to, but eventually, just on their decision alone, they're going to try to move away from it.
Yeah, and the thing is, you and I are out here in a minority position because the average ag person, this is my fear, believes that we won, believes that because Mexico recanted, because Mexico backed off, or as this headline says, softens their stance on GMO corn import ban. There's a bunch of people in Agville that think, yeah, we taught them a lesson. I'm like, you dumbass. We didn't teach them anything. We just went and shook the neighbor down, and it's not good long-term business.
No, I mean, you're going to take the wrong. There's 100% chance of people taking the wrong lesson from this. And the pure reality is, the Mexican government is saying we wanted to start this in January of 2024. The reality is that right now, if they wanted to do that, we would struggle mightily to get that done. There just wouldn't be there. And
well, because of the seed stock. I mean, you already have your seed lined up because you've always bought and planted, or you generally don't do genetically engineered seed. And so, but there's maybe not enough of it laying around for this spring, but sure as hell, we'd figure out a way to get as much of it produced as we could.
Well, absolutely. And that's 100%. And that's, like I said, it would be more pricey the first year, and there would be some growing pains as far as getting it shipped, and there'd be some seed supplies things and all of that but between industry trying to sell seed and growers trying to make money, you would absolutely make that problem better by, fall of 2024, and then by spring of 2025, you're in a much better position.
All right, I'm going to throw one more at you, Mr. Swanson. I sometimes call him professor. This guy is constantly taking classes. He's the only guy in Western Illinois who has an Auburn hat on because he's taking classes like via online from Auburn. Anyway, dig this. And you heard it here first. And my wife always says, like, Damian, you were saying stuff to ag people like 8 years ago and they thought you were crazy. And she's like, isn't that exactly what's happening right now? Yeah. You know what I really think? I think that we know about European Union rules against genetically engineered seed, and now Mexico. And what that tells you is if they were desperate, if they just absolutely needed whatever little calorie they could get their hands on and they never paid their bills, they couldn't make any demands. They made demands because, as we said, they're an ascending economy and an ascending customer of American agriculture. And they made this request, or actually made a ban, which we responded to with force, essentially. I believe that this continues, and I'm all pro GMO. It's fine. But I'm telling you, this will be when Mexico can now start saying we want to not have genetically engineered food crops. What the next shoe falls. You know what I mean? I see this happening, and we are, as an industry, unfortunately, or the Corn Grower Association, Matt, look like they're outdated. They look unresponsive to global market demand. Am I right?
Unresponsive. Yeah, I think that's the discussions that I've had with some grain traders, both, on Twitter and in person, is we don't look responsive to what the customer's needs are. You can argue until you're blue in the face about GMO versus non-GMO health, all of those things. At a certain extent, this is trending in a direction.
There you go.
That we look unresponsive. And quite honestly, part of AMLO, or the Mexican president's motivation in this, is to say, Mexico is the home of corn in antiquity, right? Yeah. They feel like they should be self-sufficient in corn production. And this is a way for, he bans GMO corn. Well, that takes cheap GMO corn out of their supply, essentially. And that incentivizes Mexican producers to grow more corn. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean,
yeah, is this actually, again, you said there's a very big chance, 100% chance that American ag gets the wrong lesson. They will take the wrong lesson from this. And again, you might have just done a thing where Mexico gets stronger and says, well, then I guess we're going to just do more to be a producer because that's the situation. One thing that I get concerned about is these trade groups. And again, I'm talking about the checkoff funded dollar, farmer funded stuff. They work for the farmers, or at least they get their money from them. I don't know how much work they actually do for them. They're going to now tout that they won this battle. And I'm afraid that they end up looking more increasingly out of touch, and are going to end up ultimately providing a disservice to the farmers that they purport to represent and help advance.
In this case, they're not necessarily out of touch with the farmer, but are they out of touch with the market and the direction it's heading? Absolutely.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely. All right. So your last thoughts on this. The tough part is it'd be better if you and I disagreed. We've disagreed on stuff before, but not on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. No. In this case, I just it's mind-boggling to me, and I understand, and there's maybe some other reasons that maybe we shouldn't talk about, but the direction they're trending for, I don't know. It's hard. It's so mind-boggling to me. It's hard to get the words out. It's super frustrating that you've got an existing customer, a fantastic customer, that's asking to spend more money, and our response is no, we can't do that.
Right. And it's not that we can't do it. It's absolutely, that's the other thing. You know what, you ever notice, like when you're a customer and you go, Matt, and it's maybe a large corporation. It's like the kind of companies that make you call and it's impossible to talk to a human, right? And you get pissed off because you can't talk. That's kind of the same thing. Or when a big company, and they kind of have you over a barrel, tells you, well, that's just our policy. It's like, no, it wouldn't have to be that way. You could have a person actually take care of my problem. No, that's not our policy. That's what we look like right now. And we're going to make them the terrible mistake of thinking somehow that we won. We didn't win.
Yeah, well, essentially what we're doing is incentivizing if they're going to stick with this, and let's just assume that they do in some way, shape, or form. Okay, over the long run, and there's going to be.
You mean if Mexico goes back to they softened their stance on the ban, but they didn't come up out of nowhere. They're going to come up with it. They're going to do this eventually. Is what you're saying?
Yes, and it doesn't even have to be Mexico. It can be any number of any other countries like the EU or something, or from these places that have already done it. Essentially, what we've done by forcing their hand into it is incentivize production elsewhere, whether it's in Mexico or in South America or any number of those places. And one of the NCGA directors said to me, well, the South Americans are with us on this today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what a lot of these folks don't understand is they think, again, that they're irreplaceable. Trust me, if I have acres in Argentina and I say, wait a minute, now there's enough of a premium and enough of a demand for non-GMO corn. I can produce this here, and there's enough of a premium that I can justify the shipping, and that's exactly what happens.
I mean, most of us have been in a situation where we get ticked off at a company and we go spend more money somewhere else just out of spite, right? And I realize this is kind of that on a grand scale, and that's frustrating.
I think the big one, Matt, is again, I want to go back to this belief that somehow you're irreplaceable, or that you can just force your customers to do what you want them to do. I'm old enough to remember when American automobile manufacturers believed that you had a choice. It was between a GM, a Ford, or a Chrysler product, and then came Toyota and Honda, and what the response was. We ought to make it so those aren't allowed here. Like, yeah, let's keep putting our shitty Chevy Vegas out there and force the customer to buy them because we actually can't keep up with a Toyota Tercel or a Honda Accord.
And it's counter to the American ideal, right? That's kind of crazy is this country's built on people building companies to respond to a consumer need. And our response as a mature republic is to say, well, this is what we grow, so tough.
Yeah, and tell us the science. Tell us the science. Bang on about the science. Right. All right. I think we've covered it. And by the way, if you disagree with our stance, that's fine. I believe that we're right. And I believe that Matt Swanson and I, in a rare moment of agreement, he and I agree on this. We've done long-term harm. And like I said, the wrong lesson will be taken away from this. And also what we just did is trust me, the last run up in commodity prices between 2006 and 2013 brought a whole bunch of new acres and new bushels of corn onto the market. And if you think that us pushing around Mexico on this topic won't bring new bushels of non-GMO corn to the market, you're being naive, myopic, stupid. I don't know what, but I think this is long-term bad.
I agree.
His name is Matt Swanson. He's got a big following on Twitter if you want to keep up with them, or you can find him through me. And also we can check out the work that he's doing over at XtremeAg. It's XtremeAg.farm. Extreme, no E on the front of it, XtremeAg.farm. Check it out there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Until next time, this is the Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of the Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.